welcome to Analog Insights. In today's episode, I'm taking a closer look at the Tokyo Kogaku Topcor-S 50mm f2 lens, which is a true gem and sleeper lens that deserves so much more attention than it usually gets. And it basically was a competitor of the Leica Summicron back then in the late 1950s and early 1960s, so it was aiming for that, to aim for the benchmark basically, and it was certainly a competitor of the Nippon Kogaku, so Nikon lenses at the time, and also the Canon lenses that were all made for the Leica thread mount, so the LTM. And the only limitation of these lenses here are the 1 meter minimum focusing distance, but other than that, they're really interesting. And they can also be adapted, as you probably know, to the Leica M bodies using an adapter. And this of course makes them incredibly interesting even until today. The build quality was fantastic, and also the optical quality, and this is what makes this lens here so special. You have a wonderful sharpness and high resolution in the center, even when shot wide open. You have a beautiful smooth bokeh and foreground background separation, and a wonderful color rendering, and all that in a lens that in excellent condition typically costs only 200 to 300 euro, precisely because the company Tokyo Kogaku has largely been forgotten by now. And this is what makes this lens so special and interesting. It is very hard to find any information about it in the first place, and only if you basically know what you're looking for, you can find some bits and pieces hidden in forums, and then you need to make sure and fact check it and so on. And this is basically what I did, and was one of the motivations when I first raved about this lens here in my Canon L2 review. I already mentioned I want to dedicate an entire video on this lens because I was so surprised to not only discover it, but also to see the kind of quality that I got out of this lens, especially since it is such a vintage lens coming from the late 1950s and early 60s. So, as always, I took the lens through its paces and shot all sorts of different black and white and color negative film, and as always, these were scanned and developed by my trusted on-film lab in Frankfurt, and I can't wait to share the results here with you. So, let's take a closer look at this lens, the optical qualities, the handling, the general performance, and my personal impressions. Let's dive in there. Before diving into the lens, let's get some historical context first. Tokyo Kogaku was founded in 1932 in Tokyo and originally catered to the needs of the Imperial Japanese Army, producing binoculars, cameras, and other optical instruments. And its main competitor was Nippon Kogaku at the time, that basically did the same but for the Imperial Japanese Navy, not the Army. And an important milestone in the company history is 1963, when they released the first ever single lens reflex camera with lens metering called the Topcon Super 35mm. And this quickly became the official combat camera of the US Navy, and was used most in the Vietnam War. And this was an all-metal construction, all-metal body with very tight tolerances, and it was and Topcon also heavily invested in the quality of its lenses that became known for their incredible sharpness and micro contrast. But since they were produced for the relatively narrow exacta mount, there were natural limitations and not enough space for large back elements. And as a result of that, these lenses had limitations when it came to the maximum aperture, so that was often not on par with the competition. And production was eventually discontinued in 1971 because the company had really been overtaken by Nikon, Canon, and other competitors at the time that were producing lenses with higher maximum apertures. And according according to some sources, also some bad management decisions and relatively weak marketing contributed to the demise of the company. But before that, we have to go back to the 1930s and 1940s, because ever since then, Tokyo Kogaku also produced compact rangefinder lenses for the Leica thread mount in very high quality. And you have to imagine that back then there were many camera manufacturers producing rangefinders supporting the Leica thread mount, and there was a fierce competition between all sorts of different lens manufacturers trying hard to push their LTM lenses out there. And especially after the war, there were all these Leica copies. And in this particular case, for Tokyo Kogaku, they sold the Leotax Leica copies, and they always sold them together with their LTM lenses here as well. So they had reasons to push the envelope as well. And the company is not known or well known anymore, but back then it was really considered one of the producers of the finest LTM lenses out there. And to give you just one example that really stands out among the pre-war lenses, in 1938 the company introduced the remarkable, still uncoated 50mm f1.5 Simlar lens that really is considered one of the finest pre-war lenses, and is a 7-element and 4-group design by Tomita Ryoji that was actually copied by the famous J.H. Dallmayr early in World War II and sold as the f1.5 Dallmayr Anastigmat Septac. And this is one of the rare instances where a European company actually copied a Japanese one. And we have to see this particular lens here, our 50mm Topcor-S, in that tradition, and also understand that Tokyo Kogaku had quite some time, basically decades, to collect experience in producing high-quality LTM lenses. And this particular lens here benefited from it and really put a lot of the knowledge and know-how into this beautiful package that is still relevant until today. The 50mm f2 Topcor-S is a 6-element and 4-group Biotar design that came in 3 different versions. It was produced originally between 1957 and 1961 when it was replaced by the f1.8 version, but arguably the f2 version here is much more interesting. So what were the 3 different versions? There was an original all-chrome version, which is, I would say, still it can be found, but it's not particularly easy to find, and it is a little bit more expensive than the version that we have here. And then there is the so-called Panda version, the second version, also called Black Belt because of its visual appearance. And this one is the rarest of the 3. It comes with the same optical design as the first one and weighs around 294 grams. And then there was the last version, and this is the one that I have here, a silver-black aluminum version with a focus throw of only 90 degrees, and it only weighs 218 grams. And this is a really special and the most affordable version. It still comes with the same optical design, but it was produced in higher or larger quantities, and as a result of that, it is, much more affordable and can be easily had for around 250 to 300 euro in excellent condition. And before diving deeper into the details, I would, and before you're already on eBay, I know my folks out there, please avoid the bargains or what seems to be a good deal or a bargain. You might find some offers for 120 or 150 euros. But then if you take a closer look, those typically suffer from haze or fungus or similar problems. So please, instead, I would encourage you to pay a little bit of a premium and get one in a fantastic condition for 250 to 300 euro, plus of course a little bit of import tax and duties and so on when imported from Japan, but it's really worth it. What you get is a high quality lens that is really built to the highest quality standards, in line with which was common back then. You get beautiful, lovely inscriptions on this lens here. You have a buttery smooth focusing mechanism. You have 10 aperture blades that close nicely from f2 all the way down to f16 and click wonderfully into place. And they just don't build them anymore in that kind of quality, in my opinion. You get a really nice heft to it, despite only 218 grams. You can feel that it is a solid piece of glass, and you have an aluminum barrel here that makes it, of course, a little bit lighter, but still it doesn't feel like any kind of compromise, but like a really solid, nice lens. And at least to my eyes on the Canon L2, it has just the right size, so it perfectly fits that lens. If you remember my Canon L2 review, I also said back then I wanted a lens that was period correct and perfectly matched the camera. But to my eyes, it also looks fantastic on the Leica M4II or any other Leica M body. It is a really interesting lens to use on a Leica M. And I also tried it on my Oscar Barnack Leicas, and even here it looks kind of useful and reasonable. As mentioned, it was originally made for a Leica copy, the Leotax cameras, so it kind of makes sense that it also works for this one here. But to my eyes and my personal taste, it looks perfect on the L2 and very nice on the M4II as well. The inscriptions on the lens, as mentioned, are beautifully clean, but please note that the focusing distance is either available in meters or in feet, so you don't have both inscriptions on these lenses here. And so please go for the one that is common for your use case and your market. I went for the meters, and as you can see here, since the minimum focusing distance for such an LTM lens is 1 meter, it perfectly ends with that one here that is just beautiful and in line with the little line here on the inscription. Wonderful in my opinion. It's super clean design. And as I've mentioned, it feels very, very nice and high quality to the touch. So overall, a very, very interesting lens that can be had for relatively little money, given the quality and the benchmark that it was aiming for back then. This was a top-notch lens, and for a few years that it was produced, it was really a bestseller for these kinds of Topcon Leotax cameras, and also like that as a standalone. So what about the optical performance and results? This lens offers a fantastic optical quality, in part because they were experimenting with new glass types back then that contained rare earth elements. And this helped bring out the most of this beautiful 6 elements and 4 groups Biotar design, and helped eliminate some of the typical downsides. And in combination with the coating, the original amber coating, and then later on blue-purple tone, it also is well suited for shooting color negative film or color film in general. It creates, in my opinion, a wonderful color rendering, but it is also well suited for shooting black and white film. It really shines with black and white, in my opinion, because of these soft glows. In general, the lens stands out for its incredible center sharpness, even when shooting wide open, but once you stop down to f4 and more, you get an incredible sharpness here in the center. You can see that a little bit with the furry cats and so on here in some of my Morocco pictures. And you can also see the high resolution this lens here produces. So remember, this is the late 1950s lens, early 1960s in some cases, depending on the production year, but this is incredible, the kind of sharpness and resolution that it produces. And yet, It comes with a beautiful smooth bokeh, a beautiful foreground background separation. This lens was really made for mid-distance subjects, and this is also how it was marketed back then, for shooting portraits. And you can see some of the Japanese brochures from back then. And in my opinion, it is perfect to shoot this lens with a little bit of a foreground out of focus area, something that is kind of populating in a nice out of focus element the foreground, then having at a mid distance a subject in your frame, and then have something that helps you have a beautiful background transition and make your subject stand out in that classic 3D pop, as it is often referred to. This is a classic lens that works perfectly for these kinds of situations. When shooting against the lights, it's prone to flaring, as many lenses from back then, especially when shooting directly into the sun or similarly strong light sources. This is not perfect. But other than that, it is really a nice lens that only shows a little bit of corner fall off, especially when shooting wide open at f2. But other than that, it's really, really nice and offers a lot of quality and a lot of value for the money. And I would say the natural competitors are the Nikon Nikkor HC50 or the Canon 50mm f1.8 lens. And if you really aim for a lot of value for the money and you don't mind shooting lenses from lesser known brands, then I would say this is one of the most interesting bang for the buck lenses that you can get. And I would also say it's a much more interesting purchase than a classic Leica Summicron that it can certainly live up to in many respects. Of course, not exactly, it's not exactly on par with this benchmark lens, but it can certainly live up to it. And of course, it's a completely different price point, in part because it's a lesser known lens, but in part also because it has become forgotten over the years in comparison to other lesser known lenses from Canon and Nikon that can also be adapted using all the LTM lenses. As you know, you can also use them on the Leica M mount, and then suddenly they are very, very interesting until today. So a great value for the money and an interesting purchase in comparison to the typical Leica Summicron that many people get. So what about the handling and my personal impressions? The Topcor-S 50mm f2 has become one of my favorite lenses, and I find it a little bit surprising because looking at my collection, I really have a choice by now, and yet in the over 1 year that I'm owning this lens, I kept returning to using it, and it has become one of my favorite go-to lenses for various reasons. One is certainly the handling. The way it handles is just amazing. They really don't build them like that anymore. The focusing mechanism feels fantastic. I like that I only have this 90-degree focusing throw that is very fast in focusing accurately, so you don't have to worry about it being inaccurate because of the relatively limited focusing throw. I've never encountered any problems with that. Personally, I use it typically with meterless cameras, so cameras without a built-in light meter, which when I have it at eye level, it makes it convenient that I have a very definitive aperture click. So when operating the aperture ring, I get very clean clicks, and I can basically mentally count along and know how many stops I've added or removed. And this makes it a very convenient lens to use on a meterless camera where I don't have anything displayed like with the Leica M6, where I can see in the viewfinder whether my exposure is spot on or not. Here I have to mentally calculate, and this works particularly well in my opinion with a lens that makes so clear this is the next aperture stop and this is the next, and so on. So what are the limitations? You have the 1 meter minimum focusing distance, which is a typical limitations of these kinds of 50mm lenses. There were some motifs where I wished for being able to get closer to my subject, so that is a downside. Then a little bit of a nuisance might be that you have to source one that has the focusing scale in meters or feet, so the metric that you prefer, basically, the focusing distance scale that you prefer. Then what might be tricky is the 40.5mm filter size. That's not as common as the 39mm that I have on my Leica M Summicron, for instance, the V4 that I love and adore. So if you are purchasing filters or you only want to purchase them for a select group of lenses, then the 40.5mm is of course a less common filter size, might be a limitation. And as I've discussed before, I would always recommend going for one in a 90% or more condition instead of making a compromise and then later regretting it. These lenses can be found. They can be found in Japan. They can be sourced. Sometimes it might take a little bit longer, but if you then find one in great condition, please pay a little bit of a premium and a little bit more and get a great one instead of making any kind of compromises. As touched on before, the LTM mount is fantastic because you can tap into a wide range of both vintage and modern LTM cameras, like the Vogtländer Besser would also be an example, where you can easily have a 1/2000th of a second fast maximum shutter speed and combine it with this lens, or you can adapt it to all sorts of Leica M or Zeiss M bodies. So really wide range of possible cameras that you can connect it to. And in my opinion, this quality lens here is a true sleeper lens. It's certainly overlooked, and even the affordable aluminum version that I have here is just a joy to use and still feels solid and hefty enough, and without kind of being too heavy. So one of my favorite lenses that I keep returning to for various reasons. Fantastic and well suited for portraits, amazing optical quality, and if you get one in great condition, I can guarantee you will have a lot of fun for probably years. This is what I'm hoping for, and a great value for the money lens. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Analog Insights and my review of the 50mm Topcor-S, a fantastic sleeper lens that was a true joy to discover and to read more about and to learn about and to explore, and then collecting and aggregating all these information for this video here. You could probably tell I'm super excited about this lens. It's a special one. It has I have a certain relationship established to it, and for me this is the kind of lens that will always stay in my collection and that I can highly recommend taking a look at if you are a 50mm shooter and want to have certain special lenses in your collection. You might not have heard of Tokyo Kogaku before, then please do yourself a favor and read up on it and take a closer look at this particular lens here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please remember to like it and maybe even share it with your friends. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg, and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon.